Hi, it's Susabelle from Patchwork Chicken Studio, and I'm in my studio today. Obviously, I'm at my cutting table. I'm going to show you a little bit about how we start the construction for our cotton denim-backed hot pads. So we start with a layer of muslin, and this is just plain old quilting muslin. We buy this by the yard, by lots of yards at a time, so we have months worth of supply. And this is the cheapest part of the process. The muslin is pretty cheap, about $2 or $2.50 a yard, so it's cheap. And what I do is I roll the whole thing out. I buy maybe 10 yards at a time, and I split it. This is actually usually two layers, but I only need half for a pair of hot pads. So I split it, so then I have two rolls of fabric that'll last me a really long time. And then we use cotton batting. So this is, you can get this at the store, or I buy it online where it's a little cheaper. And I actually buy like batting for a queen size quilt at one time. And then I can just cut it into pieces as I go. This is the tail end of a piece. Actually, when I cut this, I ended up with about 4 yards long. And so we can make this long piece and do a lot of cutting at one time. I'm not worried about the wrinkles, believe it or not. The wrinkles don't matter. So I have my cotton batting in here, and I have my muslin on the bottom, and I have some fabric that I want to use to make hot pads out of. And so this is, again, long bolted fabric. I actually wouldn't normally buy this much fabric for the tops, but this was a good deal, and I use it for all kinds of things. And this is really cool prints, old signs, like farm signs, which I really like. So I'm going to layer this on here, and you'll see that this is actually a double piece. So there is a fold. Well, there's a fold right here, and that's okay. This is one of those processes, as we're building out hot pads, that you have to turn off your OCD. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to drive you crazy about this process, but you just got to kind of let some of that stuff go and use that energy for something else. So you notice that this is wrinkled, and that doesn't matter either. It really doesn't matter at all. So I've created my sandwich, as we call these, a sandwich with the muslin on the back, and the cotton batting here in the middle, and then this layer of fabric. And so I know I need 9 inches wide by 18 inches long to make 2 hot pads. And we're going to make 4 hot pads. We'll make 2 pairs out of this. And so first of all, I want to cut it straight on one side. It's almost there. We're going to cut this one. My rotary cutter is my best friend because it makes it easy to do things. And then I want to measure over 9 inches. And so this is marked. And so I just need to go over 9 inches. And I'm going to make another cut. Now I don't want to move my bigger piece of fabric because I'm actually going to use that here in just a second. Do you remember how I said this is 2 layers? I don't need 2 layers, I need 1. So I'm going to split this where it had a fold. And I could have done this before, but I find it's faster to just cut once and then do the split. And then I use the second piece for the second pair of hot pads. So just cut along that fold. And I'm going to flip this one over so it's facing the right way. And just line this up. So now I have my piece. And you notice there's a little extra here on the end. I usually cut that off. I don't need that. And you do notice there's wrinkles, and that's okay. Because we take this later, we iron this before we stitch on it. So I've got one sandwich here, and then I want to use this second piece. I'm going to roll this back. So I'm going to lay my second piece here. This is now a single piece, and I'm going to go over 9 inches, and I'm going to cut. Now again, this is messy. This is not exact. It's, as you can see, I got a little piece here. It doesn't have to be exact. When we quilt these, when we're done, we actually cut these to 7.5 inches by 7.5 inches. So this is more than I need, but we need that extra space because when you quilt things, on a machine or by hand, either one, it tends to draw them up a little bit. So now I have 2, and I am going to flip these over, and I'm going to cut this extra on, because when I'm quilting on the machine, I don't want to get distracted and end up having to cut all this off after I quilted it, which would be silly. So I'm just going to cut these pieces off, and these scraps could be used for something else, for piecing a quilt, or these make great bookmarks, so I may use them for that at some point. And now I have two sandwiches that look basically the same, and this is what I'm going to quilt to make the Hotpads. Hi, this is Susie Bell from Patchwork Chicken Studio again. So I showed you in the last video how I lay out the fabric, and so this is a sandwich. We call this a sandwich, and this is the pretty cotton calicos on the top, and there's the cotton batting in here, and then the cotton muslin on the back. And you can see this kind of, it was hard to pull this up. That's because I have ironed this, and so when I iron it, and I iron it on both sides, what it does, it takes out some of the wrinkles, which isn't necessary, but it helps to sort of bond these together so that when I stitch them on the machine, they don't shift around. The different layers don't shift around. And so the first thing I do is I mark, and you can see I've already marked on this one, but I use a real basic wooden ruler and regular school chalk. It's as easy as it gets, and I just create myself a starting line, and that's because I don't want to eyeball this when I'm trying to quilt it. It's easy for me to get out of whack. I do not draw lines across the whole thing though. I eyeball from that first line on as I'm doing it, which means my lines are often not even. They'll still be straight, but they might be shorter or longer away from that original line, and I don't mind that. These are handmade. There's a saying among sewists that nobody's perfect but God, and so there should always be some mistakes. I'm not a machine. I'm a person, and so they're not ever going to be completely perfect, but I think that fits with what we're doing. These are rustic style Hotpads or pot holders. They have denim on the back. We want them to be sturdy and useful and washable, but they're also going to be, made with quality, but they won't be perfect. So I'm going to show you now how we do the actual quilting. And you can see my machine has a special foot on it, and this foot is called a quilting foot. So it looks very different from a regular old foot, and what it does is it has a way of pushing the top of the fabric the same way the feed dogs are pushing the bottom of the fabric from the front to the back as I stitch. This keeps it from shifting. It still will shift a little bit, but these are small pieces, so that shifting is not a lot and is usually manageable. And you can see that these edges are not quite even. They're just a little off, and that's okay. Remember how I said we cut that off, and so it doesn't really matter. We want to have that fabric laying as flat as possible, connected to the batting and the muslin. And so I stitch right along that line that I drew, and I use a fairly large stitch because it's quilting. So I have my first stitch there, and you can see that chalk line, but we actually can brush that out with a little nail brush, which I do when I cut these. And so then my next thing is to move over about an inch. And again, remember I said it's not exact. I just try to make them consistent. And so I'm going to go ahead and stitch this next one. You notice I did not cut my thread. I just leave it be. This particular machine, most of the time you have to hold thread before you let it take off, otherwise it sucks it back in. This particular machine, for whatever reason, never pulls thread, very rarely pulls thread, and so I often don't have to hold on to it. It can just be where it is. Now some quilting feet, especially some of the older ones, have a little bar you can stick in them. They have a little hole with a bar, and then the bar can be set along. You can adjust it, you can pull it in or out, and you can set it along the stitching from the previous line to help you keep in line and keep straight. Mine doesn't have that, but that's okay. It works fine anyway. the top here on the calico, I don't notice if I'm out of line as much. What I'll see is it on the back. We'll take a look here in a minute. You notice it's a little noisy. That's the foot. The foot is doing its job, obviously, but it is a little noisy because it's banging up and down with the feed dogs. You know, I'm not sewing overly fast. I actually sew straighter if I go faster. But this machine will go quite fast. So I'm almost done with this half. I'm on the edge here, so I am almost done. I just have a few more rows to do. I'll leave about 2 more rows here. And this should be the last thing. So I've gone as far as I need to go, and I always remember I'm going to cut off a good portion of this, and so I don't want to go all the way to that edge. I'm not going to do that. So remember how I said you could tell on the back if they weren't even? So we can see that one's pretty fat, that one's a little thinner. There's some that don't quite go straight, and that's okay. Again, you have to let your OCD part of yourself go when you're doing these things, because on the front it looks beautiful. And this is the part people see. This they don't see. So sometimes my thread gets all kind of pulled up in here and stuff, and it doesn't matter because all of this gets cut off. So I'm going to finish this one by starting here and doing this direction. So I'll do about as many rows this direction as I did this direction, and this piece then will be done and ready for cutting. Okay. So we're back over at our cutting table. I finished quilting the rest of the rows, so I had only done half. Now I have the whole thing done. Remember, I'm going to try to get this chalk line out. And a nail brush works really good. I think I got this at the Dollar Tree. Pretty basic. And it's all I use it for. So it sits over here with my sewing stuff. So now we can't see that chalk line anymore, which we want. Nobody wants to buy something that has some lines on it. So now I want to cut my 7.5 inches, and you can see there's all my threads. I never cut the thread until the end. And so these are going to show up. Sometimes they get trapped in there. Again, it doesn't matter. This is on the back and it disappears. So we're going to cut this one to 7.5 inches. And these cutting boards, they're called self-healing, so when you cut on them, they kind of seal up, but eventually you have to replace them. I actually have to replace mine about once a year because I do an awful lot of cutting. But it's really great for making straight lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5. So I'm going to go ahead and trim the long side of this. So now this is the width I need, and I need to go ahead and cut this down to 7.5 inch squares. If I do it right, I'll have a piece left over I can make into a bookmark. So I want to look again, make sure that I'm not cutting below my batting. I want to cut within that space. Let me use a different ruler here. So the shorter one. So snipping off the end and then going over 7.5 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You may wonder why I count. It's because I don't always add well in my head. I get out of sync. So I just count. If it's small, I just count. So that one is 7.5. And this one will be 7.5. So now I have 2 7.5 squares. And then I have this one, which if I serge around the edges, becomes a really nice bookmark. So I do bookmarks all the time from leftovers. And we include those in our packaging when we send things out for people. So I have these two cut. So now I want to cut the denim. And you want to remember that when we're doing these, we tend to do big batches at a time. It's actually easier to do big batches at a time than it is to do, you know, 1, 2, 3, do from beginning to end. So we tend to cut out a whole bunch at one time. So I'm just showing you one if we were just doing one pair. So this is the denim, and I buy this at the fabric store. So like blue jeans, only it's brand new, right? And I want to cut a 9-inch square out of this. That gives me enough to fold over to make the hot pad. So use my long ruler here. Denim is really hard to cut. You need a nice sharp blade and a lot of pressure. And I usually have to cut twice because this is 4 layers of denim. I can't open it up because it's too big. It doesn't fit on the cutting board. And if I can't see the ends, I can't make the cuts. You got to be able to see both ends of the board. So this one needs to be 9 inches. So 36 minus 9 should be 27. That math I can do. So now I have a piece that's 9 inches wide. And now I want to cut it into 9-inch squares. And this part, this selvage part, we don't actually want to use that on the hot pad. So I will snip that off. Selvage can be a little, it's very tough, but it tends to be out of whack. So it won't be exactly straight, and so it can pull the sewing one way or another. And so I tend to cut selvages off almost all the time. So we're going to cut that one off. I will still have plenty of fabric. So I'm very careful when I cut denim because denim is expensive. Denim is $17 to $20 a yard. I want to make sure I'm not wasting anything. And I'm using it all for hot pads. So this one, again, we're going to cut to 9 inches. So 35 minus 9 is 26. So I'm going to start here. And I'm going to go ahead and keep cutting. Because remember how I said we do these in batches? I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of this. So 26 minus 9 is 17. And 17 minus 9 is 8. And I went ahead and did this because I wanted to show you one more thing. I have my 2 pieces. So this will make 1 pair of hot pads. What I have left is this. So this is a piece that's about 5 or 6 inches. It's actually pretty big. Well, the other thing I need for my hot pads is a loop on the corner. They all have a loop on them. With a loop so we can hang them. So I want to make sure that I have the denim cut for that as well. So I'm going to use this piece, and I want to cut as many 1.5-inch strips as I can get out of this. Remember, we're making more. I would only need 1 strip if I was making 1 pair of hot pads. But I'm going to cut 1.5-inch strips. And these are what I'll turn into those loops. And again, the wrinkling doesn't matter. These get ironed. So I got 3 strips out of this. So I will take this to the iron, get it wet, damp, with a squirt bottle, and I fold it in thirds. Fold it in thirds, and then we stitch a zigzag down that open seam. And then this will cut into 3 loops. So I can get 3 loops out of this one little strip. So this is Insel Bright. Insel Bright is what we need to make this an official hot pad. If you buy hot pads in the store, they do have something like this in them, maybe called something different. But basically what it is a batted piece of metal. I'm not even kidding. Now we cut them They're the same size as the calico. And this is super hard to see, but you can see that shine in there, right? And if I cut this crooked, I'll see some of the metal fiber. There's a very thin fiber, metal fiber mesh in here. And the reason for that, the purpose for that Insul-Bright, is to pull heat away from your hands. So because of that metal layer, it sort of conducts that heat away from your fingers. That's why you can hold on to a pot longer than you think if you have a good hot pad. This is also why if you get a hot pad wet, they burn the heck out of you, because water conducts that heat right back and multiplies it. So this Insul-Bright layer has to go in all of our hot pads. It gives it thickness, yes, but it helps to sort of wick away that heat when you're actually using the hot pad. Okay, so we are ready to do the last construction on the hot pads. And what I did that you did not see is that I made the loops for the corners. So this was that long strip that I had that was 1.5 inches wide. I folded it in thirds and ironed it down, and then I stitched the open area, the open seam on there, so it would be a solid piece. And so these are done. We'll be working with those in just a few minutes. And so I want to put my Insul-Bright. See, there's some of that messiness. See some of that messiness on the back that I said you can't worry about it. You just gotta let it go. Now, I could go through here and pick them out, but it doesn't matter. So I'm just gonna ignore it. And this is my layer of Insul-Bright that I'm putting on the back here. And then what I wanna do is trim these corners. And so all that is just taking just a little triangle off of the corner. And this reduces some of the bulk in the corners where I have to turn the denim to make the corners. And it's a lot for the machine to do, to put these, to sew onto denim anyway. But then when I'm putting this and I'm trying to sew around these corners, I try to take away some of the bulk because it does help the machine. It's a heavy lift for it to try to get through everything. So I'm gonna place my nice little trimmed batting and my Insul-Bright around the middle of the piece of denim. So this is my 9-inch piece of denim. So you may notice I'm using a different machine. So this machine is Italian-made Necchi Lilia, and my mother bought this when I was a baby because she wanted to sew me baby dresses, and you know, she couldn't have a girl without having, you know, sewing some baby dresses. And so I was quite well dressed. And she bought it used, so it was a year or so old when she bought it. And she bought it on time payments, all by herself when she was, you know, a very young woman. So anyway, it was her machine, and she has a lot of other machines, both vintage and modern, that she uses and loves. And this one had sat for a while, so she just asked me if I wanted it, and of course, yes, I want it. So here it is with me. And it has a table that my dad built for it, but the table's too big for my house. So I just have the machine. Eventually they will be reunited when I move back to Missouri, but I'm in Colorado, and so for now we are separated. It is the way it is. So anyway, this sews a really nice zigzag stitch, as you can probably tell. There's a very nice zigzag there, very clean, and this machine can handle heavier fabrics, and it's also fast. So I don't need any kind of special foot or anything. I'm using a standard zigzag foot. I have this set on a wide zigzag. Anytime I'm sewing something heavy, this is the machine I come to. So the way I do this is I turn this over. So I'm just turning it over, and I don't turn it over double because it would be too much bulk. So that I would get through the sides okay, but the corners would be a problem. There'd be too much bulk. But also, these are denim. We want them to have a little bit of a rustic look, a little bit of fraying, and they will only fray or ravel as far as the stitching goes, but it's a nice look. So as these get washed, they fray just a little bit where they were stitched together, and that's a cool look. It's a rustic look that we like. So I only turned the once, so this is a raw edge here. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. And this machine is one of my quieter machines, but it is noisy at this point because it's punching through denim. That's a workload for it. So that needle punching through can be a little bit noisy. And so to create the corner, and I know this is not going to show up all that great on video, but I turn the corner of the denim under to meet this edge here. So I've turned that corner under. This creates a corner for me that I can just turn up. So I get this little point, and I'll show it to you close up when we finish so you know what it looks like. And you notice that I'm pushing this fabric down. I'm not pushing it through the machine, but what I am doing is pushing it down so that it doesn't get hung up, so that it's straight and flat as it's going through for the stitching. And then this has a reverse, so I can just reverse to get back out of that corner. And I'm just going to keep going. We're going to get this one done. And I want to try to keep this even distance. It's not an exact science, but I could pin it, but then I'd have to pull pins as I went. If I were new doing this for the first time, I absolutely would pin it, but I'm not. I've been making these for a long time, and I've made hundreds of them, so I kind of know what I'm doing now. So just done our second corner, and go far enough. Whoops. Go a little bit forward. There we go. So I'm ready to continue on. So I'm going to fold that little corner under right there. Gives me a point. You notice I back up just a little bit at the corner, and that's just to give it some strength. So I do a little reverse stitch right at the corner. I don't want these to fall apart. I don't want them to fall apart when they're being used, and I don't want them to fall apart in the wash. And so I make sure everything's stitched down well. We are almost back where we started. A little more corner to do. Up a little bit and meet up with our stitching, and there we go. We have finished going around the Hotpad. So let me show you how the corners look. So you can see that corner, I just stitched it twice. If you look on the back, and I need to turn my thread, if you look on the back, you can see that as well. You can see where it's gone twice, and that's going to give it the sturdiness it needs. Plus I'd have to trim thread if I didn't double stitch it, and that's work. So I have this Hotpad done, okay, and I want to decide now where I want the tab. So I'm going to look at it and decide, is it going to hang this way or is it going to hang this way? I think it's going to hang this way. So this is the corner that I want to put the tab on. And so remember, one side is a raw edge. So one side is a raw edge and the other one is not. And so I want the raw edge to be tucked inside as much as possible. So I don't want the raw edge out here because it will ravel just from use, and that gets messy. So we don't want that. So I'm going to turn it so that that seam is inside. And then if you remember, I said that there was about 6 layers of denim here. Well, now I'm getting ready to add 6 more layers because this is folded 3 times times 2, and I can do that math. So this is a heavy lift for this machine. I want to make sure, I'm going to fix that. Make sure I'm going the right way here. Yes. So I want to make sure it has enough space to get through. I want to make sure it can go under there. And I'm going to go slowly. So instead of zippity doing along, I'm going to go slowly. I'm going to hold everything in place. And I'm going to let the machine do its job. So you can see it's just going right through it. And then I'm going to back up slowly, or as slow as the machine will let me. And so now I have my tab on there. So you can see that tab is attached. You see it's right there, it's attached. Now I have some extra left over, and that's because I'm not stitching on the very edge. It's really hard to stitch on the very edge and expect the machine to stitch high here and low here. So I just fold them where I need them to go. And then I snip off this extra with a sharp pair of scissors. So now it's nice and even. And this will ravel just the slightest bit, but it's just going to ravel up to where that zigzag is. And then there's one more thing I have to do with these. So as I'm stitching around, touching denim makes it ravel. And so there is thread here. So there's some thread here that's already raveled, and I don't want to sew it with that all, you know, looking messy. And so I'm going to go through with a pair of little scissors, and I'll just trim those off. And then it's not going to ravel any farther than where that stitching is. So this is just the ones that came up when I was messing with it, holding it with my hands and forcing it through the machine. There's always a little bit of raveling, and so it takes me a couple minutes. I just go around, trim anything that's kind of sticking up and shouldn't be there. But then that's it. We're done. So we have our hot pads, and I have the pair of these. I did the other one first off camera. So, but this is how they look, and we're all done. These are ready to go. They'll be in my next live sale. You know, I'm all ready to go with these. So now you can kind of see the process of what it takes us to make hot pads. These hot pads, they're beautiful. They're practical. They're going to last for a long time. They can be washed. Obviously, I'm going to throw them in the wash with my clothes. I'll spot treat them if they need it. They're 100% cotton. So the only thing that's not cotton is that layer of Insulbright. It has that metal layer in it that has a poly batting on it, but it's between layers of cotton, so it's fine. Because it's cotton, they're not going to melt when they get hot, but also because of that Insulbright layer, you don't want to put them in the microwave. We know we don't put metal in the microwave, correct? So, but these are going to be great in your kitchen. We sell lots of different styles of these because every kitchen is different and everybody has a thing that they like. And so, you know, we find fabrics that we think people will be interested in and turn them into hot pads. Our denim is always new. I did explain that at the beginning. Always new. We did used to use blue jeans. We'd take blue jeans apart, but we didn't like that quality. So we're back to brand new materials. And these are going to last for a lifetime. So we're proud of them. We like working on them. We hope you enjoyed watching the process of how to make them. Now you know they don't take 5 minutes. They take some time. This is why we do them in batches. So I do everything at once. I cut all of that calico first, and then I sit down and I quilt all of those. Sometimes I have 20 or 30 sandwiches that I'm working on. And then I cut out the denim and I'll do the loops and cut out the Insulbright. So there's a process to getting everything done. And then finally we sit down and we construct them on, you know, on the sewing machine, and that's like 5 minutes. But the rest of that took a whole lot longer than 5 minutes. So anyway, we hope you enjoyed this. Give us a like or a follow or a subscription on YouTube. We'd love that. You can find us on Facebook at Patchwork Chicken Studio. You can check out our website, patchworkchickenstudio.com. We're happy to hear from you. You can always email us, leave us a comment on YouTube, send us a message through Facebook. We're always very responsive. So we'd love to hear from you, and we hope you're having a great day.